Hi, everyone, and welcome to the sixth AGA Gemological Career Forum. This is going to be a really exciting career forum, and we're ready to get to it. But of course, I have a few announcements first. The first one is that registration is now open for the 2024 AGA Tucson Conference. Kate's going to be posting the registration link in the chat. And it's going to be a great conference. Of course, we're going to be celebrating our 50th anniversary as an organization in 2024. So this conference is going to be extra special. We hope that you will join us there, and then also for the gala dinner dance afterwards. It's going to be a lot of fun. For those of you who are unfamiliar with AGA, we're a professional organization with members from all over the world who share a passion for gems and gemological training. We've been providing gemologists with continuing education and networking opportunities through conferences, virtual presentations, and newsletters since 1974. I think everyone in the gemological community agrees. If you ask them, the AGA Tucson Conference is the place to be for continuing education for gemologists. If you can't join us, we do record the presentations, and you can purchase access, register to purchase access for those presentations, those recordings. And I encourage you to do that. There's a lot of really good information disseminated. AGA is very dedicated to the future of gemology and to education. And to that end, we offer a $5,000 gemological education tuition scholarship. Applications are going to be open in January for that scholarship, and we also offer a up to $10,000 gemological research grant. Applications for that will also be open in January, so we encourage you to take advantage of those opportunities. As always, I want to thank our sponsors. Without their generous support, we couldn't do what we do. A special thank you to Art Samuels and EstateBuyers.com, who has been the AGA Diamond sponsor for 8 years now. Our Ruby sponsors are the Gem Shopping Network, Stuller Settings, and Thermo Scientific. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate Heritage Auctions, Magilabs, Quantum Leap Appraisal Software, the American Society of Appraisers, the Canadian Gemological Association, and the Scottish Gemological Association as our Emerald sponsors in 2023. We would love it if you would consider these businesses and organizations for your professional needs. We are actively soliciting AGA sponsors for 2024. So if you or someone you know would like to learn more about the benefits of AGA sponsorship, please contact me. Kate will post my email in the chat. A gemological credential opens the door to a whole new world of opportunities. Our goal with this series of forums is to allow you to explore what you might be able to do with your gemology. So joining us today as panelists are 3 real change makers in the world of responsible gems and jewelry. Like all of our webinar presentations, this forum is being recorded. We encourage you to visit our digital library to view the past forums and our webinars and learn more. The welcome message that was included with your registration contains the link to the virtual library, and Kate will also be posting it. And now I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Cheatham Lulay, who, by the way, was the brainchild behind this whole series of webinars and whose commitment to gemological education knows no bounds. Cheatham is an AGA Bonanno Award recipient. She is an AGA Conference Committee co-chair and vice president. Please welcome Dr. Cheatham Lulay.
Thank you, Terry. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are and wherever you're joining us from. I'm, again, excited about being here and sharing such an important subject with you. This subject of responsible gem and jewelry has been in the forefront of our business for a very long time, but also we've been observing a lot of confusion over it. So I wanted to bring in three very important names into the discussion for all of us to learn from them, and also again basically open up the questions for especially the newcomers, and what can you do with your gemology audience most of the time. But in the meantime, I know that we have a lot of established gemologists and appraisers in the audience, and we would like to answer those questions coming from those backgrounds, which is a great example how diverse our business is. Before we move on to our discussion, I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't joined us before, you will see a GoToWebinar control panel on your screen, and there are two relevant boxes to you. One is a question box, and we encourage you to write any questions to our panelists on that box, so that we can monitor the questions and ask them after our discussion is over, because we would like to ask more. We have enough time for that. If the questions are not answered within the time frame, we will be here for about an hour and a half, then we will be able to send them to you as a PDF as answered questions, so your questions will not be left unanswered. In the meantime, please keep an eye on the chat box, because our Executive Director, Kate Donovan, will be posting all the relevant websites, pages, information, and whatever you need to know about our panelists will be there. So you will get all that information that needs to be followed, and I'm pretty sure that you will benefit from that. With that, I'd like to move on to our panelists. I'm sure you read their bios, so I'm not going to waste too much of the time to read all of them, but I would like to show, or at least emphasize, why we have three panelists that are coming from entirely different backgrounds. And you might realize that other than Laurent, either Eric or Patricia are not working as gemologists in this business, but they are working with gemologists, and they are serving quite deeply to gemological world. So I wanted to bring them in because the subject is really their expertise in that regard. So I'd like to start with Patricia. Patricia Mweene is from a really interesting background. She worked in jewelry design, but she's got a double master's in both management and project management and business. So she understands business much better than anybody can understand in many ways. But in the meantime, coming from a country that produces so many gemstones and working with the local communities and so on, Patricia has a lot to say about what's going on in our responsible gem and jewelry chain. So we're looking forward to listening to her points and observations. Dr. Laurent Cartier is a well-known gemologist and also dedicated his time into research in ethical and responsible pearl farming, especially. So we will ask him to talk about that a little bit more, and he will bring in the background of laboratories, the gemological laboratories, and their importance in the picture, which is really a good point to clarify certain misconceptions, I should say. Eric Braunwart is our pioneer in the subject. I remember listening to some of our colleagues who shared the very first meeting with Eric decades ago, and they say that when Eric came up with the responsible gem mining and bringing the gem cutting and basically following the whole responsible gem and jewelry concept to the picture, most people wouldn't even listen to him. Today, he created this beautiful environment and still working on it very hard, and he knows from start to end what's going on there. So we will take a lot of lessons from his experience today. Hopefully we will have enough time to share. So I think I've spoken a little too much, so I wanna ask my first question, and the first question will be a little long, but it is all for our panelists. So I will ask them one by one to answer this question as much as they can, because this is quite important for us to understand where we're starting. Then we'll take the discussion from that on. So the question is basically about these concepts. So what do words such as ethical, responsible, sustainable, transparent, and traceability mean to you in your own worlds when you work in your own careers? And also, do you find these words used differently, loosely, or even wrongly in gem and jewelry business, and what your observations are? Can we start with Laurent and see what your opinions are and your answer would be for these?
So I'm going first, is that it? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation to speak. And that's a really tough first opening question, but I think it's a great question because it's one that we often come back to. The big challenge with these terms, and they're used by jewelers, by dealers, by miners, by industry associations, by many different people, and even consumers walking into stores, is that people use these terms both interchangeably and they mean different things. So the word ethical, somebody once said that ethical is like jelly. It just, what does ethical mean? It's difficult, right? The other term is responsible. Responsible, it's very virtuous. We all want to be responsible. Does anybody want to be irresponsible? So how do we define responsible? If you're doing the minimum legal standard, which is not to employ children or not to exploit your employees, that is following the law. It is, of course, responsible, but I think it's also kind of the strict legal minimum. Then I think sustainable is a word that has been horribly overused, unfortunately. And yet when you look at science, sustainable or sustainable development is actually one that's been pretty well defined, which is to say that you leave the next generation with just as much as what we have right now. So that's an interesting one to work with, both for gemstones and jewelry. It's the idea that we're taking out gems from the earth. Well, what are we giving back? Be that environmentally, socially, economically. So I think that's one where we can have a deeper conversation about. Transparent, doesn't everybody want to be transparent? The question is, what level of transparency do we adopt? And then traceability, which is, in a way, how do you trace things through the supply chain? And different people might have different approaches to how much information they want to give. So I think, as you could probably gather, it's very subjective. So I think the first thing when somebody uses these terms, be it a dealer, a jeweler, anybody, is to ask, well, what is your definition of that? And that's why I think transparency is so important. If we're clear about what we mean, if we're willing to give information, even though it might not always be complete or full, that is a great first step. So that is kind of the approach that I would take. And there have been initiatives by industry associations to define these terms. One that is a headache for a lot of people is recycled for recycled gold. How do you define that? I think ultimately people really need to be a bit more open about what they mean when they use these terms. And the FTC in the US has been clamping down on green claims and claims of being eco-sustainable, whatever, unless you can kind of back that up with certification, which brings about its own problems. But I would say, if you're having conversations with people about these themes, let's start defining them. And if we can't define them, let's at least explain what they mean to us so that we can kind of be on the same page.
Thank you. Patricia, would you like to share your opinions on that?
Yes, I'd like to add on to what Laurent said. I think with me, there's a disconnect between, well, first of all, I'm very privileged because I have one foot in Europe and then the other foot in Zambia. So I have two perspectives. And coming in with my background, from business studies and supply chain management, finance, and then delving into the world of ethical jewelry or ethical gemstones, it's been challenging for me to use those words because they have a different meaning here than they have, let's say, in Zambia, like in the community where these gemstones come from. So I struggle a lot because there's a disconnect between these two worlds. And what I'm trying to do basically is to bridge that gap. And the way I'm doing it is via education. So you might, yeah, I'm used to hearing the words, ethical jewelry, ethical gemstones, sustainability. And from an academic perspective, I understand what those words mean, and I try as much as possible to try and explain to people in Zambia that this is where the world is going. But I wouldn't call it like a language barrier. I'd more or less maybe say that there's maybe a cultural barrier to understanding, or coming to grips with the words, because the emphasis that is put on gemstones outside Africa is not the same emphasis that Africans have to diamonds, gold, and gemstones. So there is this divide there's a cultural divide. There is like a language divide in how we understand those words. So for me, it's work in progress, and I feel like if I can get people in Zambia to understand, to approach sustainability, to approach ethics in the value chain differently, and to put a value on the raw materials that we have abundantly, then we will be at a point where we can discuss ethics. We can discuss sustainability in a manner that everyone understands what it's about. But at the moment, I really struggle with it because yeah, it means different things for people here and people there. So I'm very focused on education and bridging the gap than labels, So I speak four Zambian languages, and in most of the languages that I speak, those words, responsible sourcing do not exist, So how do I explain that? So for me, the money is a language, and when people benefit from their resource, then it puts a different meaning on it, So if I say, okay, I work with responsible sourcing, but if people don't benefit from the raw materials locally, the only way to measure it is monetary. Unfortunately, people can say, oh, you put too much emphasis on money, but communities want to benefit from the raw materials that they have, and if they can see the monetary value coming back from their resources, then they will have time actually to think about ethical gemstones, or to place that label like, okay, our gemstones are actually ethical because, yeah, we are actually benefiting from our gemstones, and our gold is ethical because, the value that goes out, some of it stays in our community. Until that happens, I understand, ethics and sustainability from an academic perspective, but until like communities also get that, there's still that divide. And it's not just the communities, it's also establishments, it's people working in universities, and the example that I gave the other day, it's also the banks, putting a value. When banks locally, begin to put a value on the gemstones and understand that, for example, small scale miners can be included in the value chain. Until that happens, then this divide, will persist. So for me, it's really about bridging the divide.
Thank you. That's the key word, education, I think is required at any platform or any different worlds that you mentioned, because our world needs a lot of education too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Eric, tell us about all decades of experience with these words.
I certainly agree with what both two earlier panelists said. Yes, there's a lot of terms out there, and what do they add up to? But a couple of things that I regularly repeat when people ask, that they call us and they say we want a responsible amethyst or a responsible tourmaline, and our standard comment is gemstones aren't ethical or unethical. They're just gemstones. It's the people and the companies that bring those stones to market and produce them that define the ethics that support it. We know all of these terms. We don't like to use them. We prefer supportive supply chain, where we're looking at how we can support all the way along that supply chain instead of one element. Lauren said earlier that you follow the laws and that's ethical. Well, when companies say, "Oh, we follow all the OECD guidelines now," well, you should have followed them to start with. Is my feeling. What are you doing past that? And then we clearly, when people ask us how they can start thinking about this, again, it's, what do those terms mean to you? What are you trying to accomplish? And you need to ask the people that, and then see if they have it published somewhere. People can say a lot of things, but when you actually say, is there a statement on your website? Is there a statement on your invoices? Is there a statement on your communications? You can be held to those published statements much better than just verbal. So we also see what Patricia said, where there is this disconnect between the concepts, say, in Africa, in South America to some extent, and what we're talking about here. So what we try and explain to people at those source areas is, if they follow sort of a set of guidelines that we have helped establish, that their materials are worth more money. And more money definitely is what people are hoping for, more money for their products or their resources. So we don't try and explain it in terms of, if they do this, then it's ethical, or if they do this, then it's responsible. We try and explain it in the manner that if we can educate people along both ends of the supply chain, and that is from the source, but also to the consumer, that this idea can add more value to the product. By adding more value to the product, that helps support the whole supply chain better. So there's lots of terms. When we started, if we even uttered one of them, we were in deep shit. Now it seems everybody has it on every IG post that goes out from anywhere in the world. So it definitely has changed dramatically in the last 22 years. But I think the question, again, that I tell people is, instead of using those terms, what do you personally believe and what would you like to see happen along the supply chain? And then document that, write it down, and then try and help explain that, whether you're a retailer and you're selling to a consumer, or whether you're a cutter trying to explain health benefits of silicosis abatement or whatever it might be. Write them down so that people can actually read what you believe, as opposed to just using the term. And I think Laurent said that earlier. So there's lots of terms. I know the one that I hear quite a bit is sustainable. And we look at that, we view that differently than it would normally be viewed in the English language. Sustainable for us is, can we help sustain the community, the environment, and the people who are involved in it? Whether that's here in the United States or whether it's in Brazil or whether it's in Australia, can we be part of that sustainability in that manner? Not sustainability on the mine is going to be sustainable, and if we do this, it'll produce rubies forever. That's not going to happen. What can we do to help support and sustain the communities that are involved? So I guess that's my comments on the terms. The terms are very confusing, so I think if you get past the terms and look at the concept, we'll all be better off.
Thank you. So I guess we all need to keep our eyes open to learn more about these words and make sure that people are using them with their true meaning instead of just using them as labels. Do you agree with that? I mean, is it getting more in a label form or some kind of a marketing form in certain cases for all of you?
Well, I would say, I really like what Eric said. I would say, don't tell me, show me. So if we could live in a world where we no longer need to use these terms, right? If you no longer need to use ethical, responsible, sustainable, transparent, because you were doing all that by showing it in a credible, authentic way, and you're willing for people to come and ask questions, then I think that's kind of solved the problem. That we don't need to go round and round defining it. Now there are many people using those terms, but can sometimes be a little bit empty behind. So I think the dream world would be one where we no longer need to use those terms. And whether it's then money, as Patricia said, I think that's a really good approach as well, to say it might be money that's, in certain people's language, it might be money might be the approach to it. So.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to move on to individual questions and see what your backgrounds would actually provide or add to our discussion. So, Patricia, I'd like to ask you about your business model and how you think your business model serve the gem mining communities or material resources compared to more traditional mine to market business model. Can you open up a little bit more and tell us what are those major differences that you're aiming to achieve and how much you achieved around those terms?
Yeah. I grew up in Ndola on the Copperbelt province of Zambia, which used to be a major mining hub, still is. So what's interesting about Zambia is that despite the fact that we are a major mining country, a lot of us don't know what happens to the resources once they leave the country, So I remember, like, when I was in high school, I developed a passion, for jewelry. I used to spend all my lunch money buying earrings in the local state supermarket, so to speak. So fast forward, I moved to Denmark. Denmark is a major design country. There's lots of really big name jewelry brands. And I wanted to, well, I started making jewelry, but I wanted the raw materials that I would be using for my jewelry to come from Zambia, because I was under the impression that because we are mining, we've got gold, we've got silver, we've got gemstones, how difficult can it be? And I found it very difficult to source particularly cut and polished gemstones from Zambia, despite the fact that we have a gem cutting school in my hometown. So I set up a small lapidary just to supply myself with gemstones. And then fast forward, I realized that there was actually a very high number of unemployed gem cutters in Ndola. So my business model is very different from other companies because I'm doing things at grassroots level. The last 2 months I've been in Zambia, working with female gem cutters, trying to teach them how. I'm not the one teaching, actually, there's someone else teaching because I'm not a gem cutter, but basically trying to implement some gemstone standards, trying to get them to cut gemstones according to what the market wants. So for me, it's really about creating using local resources, creating jobs at the source, and bridging the gap, with education. But what I find interesting is that, yes, I started off trying to work with gem cutters, but in the process, I realized that, Zambia has a small, thriving jewelry ecosystem. But what hinders its development is the silo mentality that this jewelry and gemstone value chain has, where people do not communicate with each other. And despite the fact that we have quite a large number of educated people in different categories, starting from the mines. We've got 2 major schools of mines which produce mining engineers, geologists, metallurgists. We've got a school that produces gem cutters. We have quite a small pool of goldsmiths that have actually been trained, and a number of them Danish trained and a number of them Italian trained. But when people are not communicating with each other, it's very difficult actually to create a collaborative value chain. And in my book, before we can solve all these issues related to sustainability, to ethics, particularly in the worst, we have to solve the issues at the source. And regardless of, and this is just my personal experience because I've been on quite a number of panel discussions. So regardless of how much we use terms like sustainability and ethics, when those issues are not addressed at the source, it's meaningless. It has zero impact. So as Laurent and Eric said, it's not so much about the words. It's like, you have to show, don't tell me, show me what you're doing, and sorry, just a moment. Nine potato. So sorry, just giving instructions to my daughter. So yeah,
Shall we go
kids
back
are
to
beware of getting things they're not supposed to get when the parent, is on a webinar. Sorry, excuse me. So for I lost my train of thought. Sorry, my daughter just.
I'm trying to bring it back to you because actually what you touched on, communication at the source, is quite an important point here.
Yeah,
Can
I
you?
think without communication at the source, without education at the source, all these words are actually meaningless. And the sad part of all of this, like I was in Zambia. I came back from Zambia yesterday, and last week I had a meeting with one of the largest banks in Zambia. We recently, there's a cooperative that I'm working with in Zambia, and they recently opened bank accounts for all the members of the cooperative, because financial inclusiveness, starts with actually giving women access, to the bank, and the fact that the people who are working in these institutions do not know the value of the gemstones makes it actually very difficult to create inclusive supply chains. A lot of people will not do business via the bank. So when you talk about, sustainability and transparency, according to bank policies, or rather banks today have got very, very strict KYC policies where they want everything, all the payments to go through them because everyone is trying to avoid money laundering and all that. But the gemstone industry is not a transparent industry. Most of the transactions happen outside the banking system. So regardless of how much you talk about transparency, it really it really doesn't add up. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that's actually shows the differences, and communication is important, and education, of course, came up again. It is important for people who are buying them to understand what's going on at the source is very important. So thank you. That was great. I'm going to ask a question to Eric this time, and I'm going to ask about basically, Eric, can you elaborate more on how the responsible gem and jewelry market evolved since you started, and where you think it's going?
Well, when we started in that area, with the exception of Tiffany's at retail, it did not exist. So we had to look at coffee, and we looked at organic foods, and we looked at clothing and different things to try and come up with what we were basing our protocols on. And it's those protocols that we still refer back to as we're making decisions for the company here. So where is it going? I think we look at all sorts of different industries and all sorts of different services and whatever it is. We see this need to understand the environment better, to understand production better. Certainly, things dramatically changed in 2006 and 2015. 2006 is when the iPhone, the first smartphone, came on the market, and all of a sudden, somebody in Zambia could send a picture to somebody in New York. So that made a dramatic difference. It also made a dramatic difference in the variety of stones that one could sell. Traditionally, we would sell to retailers, and retailers would never buy a green sapphire. They would never buy a bicolored sapphire. They would never buy a brown sapphire or a gray sapphire. They only wanted blue. They were the gatekeepers. Then when the iPhone came on, that gatekeeping sort of changed. So that exposed people to a much wider vision of the supply chain and what was available. In 2016, you saw the Me Too movement, you saw the Black Lives Matter movement here in the States, you saw the environmental movement in Europe and the United States, and that has spilled over into the jewelry industry. That's where about 2016, before that we would talk and talk and talk, and we were just basically doing what we wanted to do because nobody else paid any attention. Now all of a sudden the younger people definitely are paying attention because they are the ones that really created this movement from the consumer forward or backward, however you want to look at it. For them, it's really important, and it's very odd when we're talking to what I call the traditional jewelry industry versus what I call the new industry. The new industry, these are all very important questions to them, and they may not have an exact vision of where they expect it to go or want it to go, but they want to get as much information as possible so they can help make their decisions that will guide their companies. So that is growing very quickly now, and which was a surprise to me. I'll tell you, the first 10 years, it was pretty brutal. We cut for a lot of other large companies, gem wholesalers, and basically we lost all of those in that first 10 years because we were, I guess they felt we were trying to make other companies look bad as opposed to just telling them what we did and where the stones came from. Now it's finally, luckily, going the other direction, and it is growing quickly now. I don't know that we have a bit of a unique market in that we do market to these people that this is important to, but I was in the business for 30 years before we started this direction. So we still have a lot of, legacy and traditional jewelers that we sell to. And right now, I would say 85% of all the people we talk to or correspond with on specific stones or a purchase or a direction or a concept, this is part of it. So that change is from 0 in 2022 to right now. We have meetings every week on it here so that our staff is kept up on how things are changing so that they can pass that information along. So if you ask the future of it, I guess the future, exactly how it will be defined, that sort of part, I don't know, any of us can tell you that. What I do know is this has become part of this new jewelry industry that we see in Europe, United States, Japan to some extent, China to some extent, and certainly then Australia and places like that. We are seeing it now to some level at the supply end, like Patricia's talking about, where some of the people are starting to understand that more information supports their businesses. Not just that, like if we're working with a broker in Zambia, say, and we say we need more information on the mines. Can you tell us how the production is going? Is there anything that along the supply chain we have a grant system? Is there anything that we can help support? Initially, everybody would clam up. They didn't want to tell you anything because they were afraid you were going to go to their supplier. And our answer, we're not doing that. We're trying to provide more information for our customers who are out actually intentionally requesting that information now. So I see it growing. Exactly how it will morph as it grows, I don't know.
But I'm curious to know your opinion on if people will understand the value when it is done more transparently, more responsibly. Because, for example, as an appraiser, will I be able to understand the difference why I should appraise those two different products differently? Do you think our industry will get to that point?
Well, I think it's already at that point. When does it is a challenge. One thing that the other panelists have seen is if one is doing traceable, documented supply chains, and if your goal is to be as upfront, honest as possible, it eliminates a lot of the synthetics that are getting mixed in as natural gems. I don't know the number. A friend of mine told me a little while ago about how much aqua goes into Bangkok, synthetic aqua from Russia. And I've never seen a synthetic. I mean, I've probably seen them, but nobody. It's the same with amethyst. One reason that Patricia's Zambian amethyst is the same price it was 40 years ago, because I would guess 40% of all the quartzes on the market are synthetic, sold as natural. So in the appraisal point of view, number one, you're going to look at them, you're going to identify it as a natural. That makes it more valuable just in and of itself. But also those that are working in other areas in supported supply chains, environment, things like that, all going to, it is going to cost a bit more. And how does the appraiser identify that? If it's gold, the various different gold systems that are out there for traceable mining, they do have a mark, and you have to apply, and you know how you use that gold. So in that case, you could have a specific mark that a person could use, knowing that that gold costs more. And there is a group that has just put, I haven't got the details on it yet, silver on the market. And what's silver? $25. This is $60. It's a lot more expensive. So if you're going to use it, one's going to have to find a way to explain appraisers, sellers understand increase that. So far as gem stuff, a few companies are doing some variety of marking. How much more that will expand, especially in colored stones that are, I don't know. But again, traceable supply is only worth something if you're looking at challenges along that supply, i.e. getting mixed in one, but also the longevity of communities who are producing them. So traceable just exposes areas that do better. It exposes areas that are being done very well. It doesn't solve any problems. The companies that are working in those supply chains need to address problems.
Okay, thank you. So next, of course, Laurent, and since we're talking about documentation more than anything else, I think this is a really relevant question to you. Where do gemology laboratories stand in the responsible market model? And more importantly, do you see any misconceptions that need to be clarified to both gem professionals and the consumer from gem laboratory point of view?
Yeah, so before I address the question that you see, or the photo that you see on your screen, I'll address the question. I think it's really interesting. I would say that ethics is nothing new. We're kind of also a little bit closed-minded at the moment, because we think of ethics as being something new, traceable, that we're catering to an audience which wants sustainable products, that we're talking to hipsters and, you know, people in Birkenstocks, and that this is a new consumer and whatnot. But actually, you know, ethics with gem treatments and synthetics, it's been around for over 100 years. It's also the reason why gem labs came about, is that people wanted independent verification of a claim. Was a gem that was being sold synthetic or not? Was it being treated or not? And more recently has come this whole story of geographic origin determination. But it means that ethics or responsible sourcing, or whatever you want to call it, it speaks to different people for different reasons. So maybe people want to know that it had a good impact. Other people might want to know, might come and see Eric because they want to be sure that they're not buying a synthetic amethyst or synthetic aqua, or you buy from Patricia because you want to be sure where it comes from. And I think that's absolutely okay, that people would come for different reasons, and that it's not just this idea of the sustainable consumer, but there's many different things. I often like to compare it to wine. There's wine, but there's wine at many different price classes from many different regions. People tell stories. Appraisers are able to price these wines differently because they factor that in. And it's not just because one wine is organic or another is not organic. And I think it will be the same for gemstones and jewelry. Some jewelry designers sell at high price points, others at low price points. And the market kind of has to adapt. And we need to come away from this black and white idea of it being a good commodity. Gemstones also have, you know, greatly different types of qualities. And I think that market is kind of finding itself right now. And consumers and the markets are also finding their place with this. And to come back to your question, what is the role of gem labs? I don't see gem labs as certifying, you know, is something ethical or not. The role is purely with education and research and testing. It is to give, you know, an independent opinion on whether something is treated or synthetic, or to give an opinion on a geographic origin. And I think that's where our role is and will continue to be. If people want to certify things, have supply chains audited, there are experts who are specialized in that and organizations who do that well. So I think, and this comes back to AGA and also AGA organizing this call, I think the more information there is available and the more knowledge is shared and the more education is out there, the more people can actually make just informed decisions. Do they want to buy a gem where there's absolutely no documents or no story? Or do they want something that comes with a story? So, you know, let's show people what it is. Let's not tell them. And then let's let consumers make up their own minds. But I think we need to continue in this direction that AGTA and ICA and others have always, you know, done about disclosing. Let's disclose information, be it on treatments or be it on supply chains. And then let's let companies and consumers make up their minds about it. And there's a photo that popped up, so I might just a little word about that, because often we talk of these concepts and it's very vague, it's abstract, but this is a very concrete example. So I did a lot of work on the sustainability of pearl farms, and this is a pearl farm, the Kamoka Pearl Farm in French Polynesia. And we actually did a study there where we counted the numbers of fish around the pearl farm, and we compared it to other comparable areas where there was no pearl farm. And we could show that the pearl farm had a positive impact on the numbers of fish. So what this means is that you're actually demonstrating that it has a positive sustainable impact in terms of just the abundance of fish around the farm. And there's a metric that can be attached to that. So for me, in my understanding of it, this would be, you know, a context where we could start talking about sustainability, because essentially you're having a positive impact here on the environment. And I think that's quite interesting. So I think these are the things that we can show. Sometimes you can't show it, but this is a very concrete example of how that can be measured and shown.
Thank you. Anything else that you would like to add about that study that would actually help us to understand more? Maybe
yeah, if you want more information, there's a dedicated website called sustainablepearls.org where we just try to share information on these things. But I mean, we're researchers, so we don't have the truth on these things. But again, the idea is really the more you give people access to information, the more they can inform themselves and the more they can make informed decisions about these things. And just the other slide that's showing up now is something that we worked on during COVID. This was the idea that gem education is actually, you know, it's very concentrated in the West. If you go do a GIA course or an FGA course, you have to spend upwards of $10,000, $20,000 to do it. It's very elitist, gemological education. So during COVID, we had some time and actually came up with free online courses that we've now translated in multiple languages on different gems, with the idea of giving access to people also in producing countries on gems, on where they come from, on treatments, on synthetics, make it as simple as possible, and to basically have also knowledge exchange and transfer take place. And interestingly, some of the countries that there's been over 20,000 students that have signed up, and some of the countries that are really high up on the list are Burma and Iran, and also some African countries. So people who are not able to travel to the US or Europe to take GEM courses, and I think that that's also really positive. And this is part of also this webinar taking place, is that the more we can share some of this knowledge, and not just sharing in one direction, but also exchanging, because I think that we gemologists have lots to learn from people in Zambia who've been working on gems for generations, but also Burmese traders or miners who've been working multiple generations on gems and know much more than I do, you know, on certain things. So I think it's this idea of exchange and knowledge and discussions that will bring this industry also forward.
Thank you. That's a wonderful point to make. We really appreciate that as AGA, especially exchanging information, not just trying to teach, but exchanging is important. So yeah, it's one of the positive impacts of COVID, I should say. Not many, but a few. Okay. Now,
if I should add something, I really appreciate the free online courses that SSEF is running, because as Laurent said, GEM education is actually very elitist. It's very expensive, so for most people in Zambia, it's completely out of reach. You know, one of the things I'm doing with a group of women in Zambia is teaching them digital skills. We got a couple of computers, and they sit down and they learn gemology online for free with SSEF. So Laurent, thank you very much, you know, for creating these free courses. It helps a lot. Zambia's got a population of, I think, 20 million, and they're less than 10 certified gemologists. You know, I'd like to see that number increase. Just in Ndola alone, in my hometown, there's over 200 unemployed female gem cutters, I'm told. They've got the Gemology Foundation, but I'd like to see more of them actually get certified. You're probably going to see a spike in people from Zambia taking those courses online. Just wanted to say thank you. It's a valuable. It's very, very valuable. I think not everyone can afford the 10,000 or 20,000 US dollars it takes to train either with GIA or Gemological. It's an association of Great Britain. So
yeah.
well,
kudos
thank
to
you,
SSEF. Thank you.
Thank you, but I'd also say at the beginning, you mentioned that the certain gemologists, but I would say that Eric and Patricia are both honorary gemologists, because they have so much experience in the trade, and as do many other people. So I think this idea that a gemologist is only somebody who's certified by this or this institution is also a little bit wrong. There's people with huge amount of experience who've never taken a course in their life, and they have a lot of things to teach us. So I think that we as gemologists also need to be a little bit more modest with these things, and keep our ears open and seek to learn from people who have a lot of experience.
I mean, I learned a new term, like in Zambia. I remember 2 years ago, shopping for emeralds, from some dealers, and obviously there's you've got the emerald color scale in English, but they have their own words that they describe the emerald colors in the local language, and one word was, because Zambian emeralds are known to be bluish green, and then the word was amenshi, which means water. So from that, I personally would like to see more local terms, like I like to see people come up with some local terms to describe the different tones of emeralds, or it could be even citrine, so that the terminology the people can understand it in their own language, because again, language is a barrier, you know. So for me, it makes a lot of sense for people to learn about gemology in a language which is close to their mother tongue as possible. It just makes it so much easier to educate people.
Well, that's a challenge because when I try to teach certain concepts in Turkish, in gemology, I generally, you know, apply all mineralogical considerations and the terminology. But when it comes to gemology itself, because it's a much more practical, technical subject, it becomes a little difficult. But it comes with experience, and you start talking to people, like you mentioned, they have a word already that maybe we don't know, but it will come with it. So yeah, I appreciate the fact that you're bringing up all these very important situations. Also, Patricia, I hope you would be able to share the information about AGA webinars, that they're open to everybody. They're on the you know, platform. We don't actually take them away. And also AGA offers gemological education scholarship too. So we welcome applications from all over the world, and we do our best to make people's lives easier when it comes to paying such high fees in education, especially if your income is not in American dollars or British pounds. You know, that makes a huge difference. So yeah,
I shared it with the bank in Zambia, because I figure out if the bank can understand the value of gemology, then they'll be much more inclined to help the small scale miners, you know. So yeah.
Okay.
Just to jump comment there from Patricia, the banks in the United States are the same way. If you're in the gem business, it's almost impossible to get financing. So you're not alone.
Okay, well, this is great. So I'd like to ask my last question to everybody, to three of you, and then I'd like to encourage our audience to type in their questions. Please do so we can ask. Don't be shy. Share, ask. There's so much to learn from our experts, so don't miss the opportunity. My last question might be a little too broad, but if you could explain that to us. Basically, it's all about your career, and that's a very specific path you took in your careers, and brings you together. What actually made you to choose this path in your career to come to this point? Eric, can we start with you?
Sure. Yeah, that mine may not be so different from a lot of people. My family was not in the business. I did get a degree in jewelry design, which was quite expensive, but I also got a degree in environmental planning and urban design. And in the jewelry design area, I just fell in love with gemstones much more than making jewelry. So I ended up quitting the environmental job I was working at the time, and just deciding I was going to start traveling around the world and going to mines and learning about gemstones. But it always was difficult for me, because my family did not come from the business background. They came from the professional background. And so we were always told or encouraged to find ways to support not just yourself or your company, but the communities around you. So in 2001, I believe it was, to something like that, I did a project with the World Bank in Madagascar to look at gemstones as a method for poverty alleviation. It was a big, long title like that. which was very interesting. They wanted me to show them, since we run a fairly organized cutting operation, they wanted to know how they could do more cutting in Madagascar. Anyway, they didn't like my report because my report basically said, Patricia, the banks won't fund anybody here in the gem business. You have to find a way to microfund them. You can't get foreign currency. They would ask me to smuggle stuff in, and I said, look, I'm supposed to be solving that problem, not being part of it. But they'd say, unless we have $2,000 worth of Malagasy francs, we can't get foreign currency. And so we can't, they all had catalogs from a variety of European and US companies, but they couldn't order anything because they couldn't get enough foreign currency. So we went through all these things that inhibited the development of a cutting industry, as well as what could help them. And that is when I came back, and that's where I guess we as a company saw that we could do more than just do business and see how much money we could make, that there could be more to it than that. And that's when we wrote our fair trade protocols. They have been updated a number of times since then, but they still are the sort of constitution, I guess you will, that we look at whenever we're making decisions on new suppliers, sometimes on new customers. It really, we look at it both ways. But in the past, we've had people from environmental sciences that had got a gemology degree, and they wanted to know how they could, how they could work in the industry. Some from the scientific background. I would encourage anyone with those sort of backgrounds. The industry is much more open to those sort of backgrounds now than it was when I started. So if you have an interest in gemstones or jewelry, and one of the ladies I talked to recently was UL, which is a big certifying group for all sorts of things in the United States. She had worked with them and monitored various different kinds of production in China and India for UL laboratories. And I said, well, you don't know gems, you have a great interest in it, but you also have a great deal of knowledge that could support this sort of newer movement in the gem industry. So there's a lot of expertise that we as an industry need. I'm sure mining engineers would be one. Health people, when it comes to, if you're mining, I mean, I talk about silicosis at the cutting facilities and what we did to address it. But if you're mining and you're going through heavy quartz areas, you're going to create dust and you're going to have the same issues. So that's where someone from the health background could also be a big help. So I think the industry probably has a wider opportunity for new people to get in now than it did 50 years ago when I started. So that's how I got into it. And that's my pitch for some new blood in the jewelry industry.
Okay, thank you. Patricia?
My first master's degree, that's in information management and finance, but I wrote a paper on how Walmart revolutionized supply chain management using radio frequency identification. So I've had an interest in supply chain management, the last 20 years. When I moved to London to study and developed an interest in jewelry making, well, it was there before, but I used to spend a lot of time in Hatton Gardens shopping for jewelry supplies. When I saw the price of gemstones, in Hatton Gardens. I remember particularly it was a piece of amethyst that I wanted to buy. It was very small, and I think it was around 70 pounds or something like that. So I was doing the calculation in my head, thinking like, it's like my dad is from an area in Zambia where the largest amethyst mine in the world is located. And obviously there's a lot of poverty in the area. So I was doing these calculations in my head thinking like, okay, this little piece of amethyst is 70 pounds and it comes from, not far away from my dad's village. I mean, surely there are people in Zambia that can cut the stone and maybe sell it in London, or else we can get much more value, for it. So that's somehow where the interest for ensuring that some gemstones were cut and polished in Zambia came about. But that being said, I think because I've got such a broad business background, I can see there's obviously this challenge. The challenges in the communities for me are an opportunity, to make a difference. Yeah. So despite the fact that I think my attraction to jewelry was also because I was looking for a creative outlet. I've been working with very information intensive job roles that required me to use my entire CPU, so I needed an outlet where I could just shut down, draw and work with my hands and all that. But it's been very it's not easy for me as a jewelry designer to be 100% there, because I am very committed to creating an inclusive supply chain from Zambia. So I spend a lot of my time trying to get people on the ground. I cannot be the only one to solve this problem. So I feel like very strongly about that. Like if this has to change, then the others, people at the source, people in Zambia, in the community have also, they need to play an active role. An example, over the weekend, we had a meeting, for example, with the local councillor in the neighborhood where the cooperative that I work with is located. So instead of just engaging, let's say, with gem dealers or with mining companies, then the support actually from the local councillor is also very, very important, because it's his job to know what challenges the community is facing, despite the fact that I say, okay, I work with local communities, but what I'm doing is like very, 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 very small, and what he can do, with the resources that he has, let's say, from the government, is much, much bigger than I can. But together, I know something about the market here, and the customers, and he doesn't have that kind of access or that kind of knowledge. So me working with him actually is like double impact actually for the community. So the way I came into this industry has been twofold. One, via education, via academia, and secondly, just having a passion and interest for wanting to make jewelry. But unfortunately, because I wanted everything to come from Zambia and I could not get it in the form that I wanted it, so I decided, okay, I'm going to create the supply chain for myself. And in trying to create the supply chain for myself, I can see that right now, there's a lot more people on board. So it's not just about me; it's about others, So yeah, there's a long way to go, but I'm happy with the effort so far.
Okay, thank you. Laurent, how about you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really come from travels, and it's come from travels. The first mine I visited was in 2005 back in Madagascar. I was doing studies on new ruby sapphire mines, and I met people. I spent quite a bit of time with them out there in the bush, and I just felt like you come to a trade show and you know nothing about the people or where the stones came from. So for me, it's actually, we talk about ethics and responsible and whatnot, but it actually boils down to the human story and stories that people tell. And I find that a lot of gemstones and a lot of pearls are just sold very generically or just for the beauty of the stone. But there's cutters that excel. There's miners who are passionate. There's miners who also live very hard lives. But there's a whole human story, just like with jewelry designers, where you tell the story. And I feel like the story doesn't get told enough. So for some people, ethics or traceable supply chains might be the way to do it, or blockchain. For others, it might just be to work with people that you've always worked with. Or right now, rough prices are high, it's hard to get good material. So if you think about it strategically, it can also make sense to work ethically. Because if you work well with your suppliers, you're going to continue to get good quality stones. Whereas if you're trying to rip them off the whole time, maybe you're not going to have that many stones anymore. So I think there's different reasons why people would kind of want to do that. And so I think it's really about going to the source, but not only, and telling stories. And it's not because something is, or it's not because a gemstone is ethical that it's necessarily nice or will sell. And as Eric likes to say, the gemstone's not ethical. It's the gemstone didn't ask anything. It's been there for millions of years. It's the people. It's how we took it out. It's how we trade it. It's who we work with. It's how we work. It's what we give back. It's what we take. And it's all that's around. So let's share more stories and let's be more passionate also as gemologists. Yeah, I think that's where I see it going.
Okay, thank you. That was great. I think all of your answers are quite inspirational, and we have a little bit close to 10 minutes, and I have some questions here, and I'd like to ask, I think we can answer maybe two, and not to anybody that are specific, but if you know anything about the question, just feel free to answer. We would appreciate that. The first one is coming from Razin Rahimi from Malaysia, and the question is starting with a very complimentary words about the event. Also, as a geologist and inspiring gemologist, I'm very interested in what Dr. Laurent Cartier do for pearl sustainability. Any advice in terms of career or employability in general for someone who's interested in both gemology and sustainability subject? One of the hardest questions.
Yeah, hard, but I think Eric summed it up very nicely in saying that, if you have a background that's not just as a gemologist, but you bring other interests to it, all the better. You need more than just a gemological degree to get ahead in this industry. And for some people, it might be that they're fascinated by the history of gemstones or jewelry design, or it might be sustainability, or that they have tracing experience, or that you have a link to a specific country like Patricia with Zambia. So I think just, travel, meet people, go to trade shows, visit mines, educate yourself, and create that niche. And there's, I think, enough to go around, and there's new business models being developed, and stay curious.
Any comments or additions from Eric and Patricia on that regard?
Well, I agree with Laurent there that if you have any background in other things, but you really like gemstones, talk to some companies, tell them about your other background. And if those companies are open to this sort of direction, they will certainly take into account and look at it. One thing that we're looking for is writers, people who are professional writers that are interested in the gem industry, because like Laurent said, if we can't tell those stories in a concise, enjoyable way, we're not going to convey them as well. So there's all sorts of backgrounds the industry needs. So talk to them about what you can bring to the industry, as well as your enthusiasm for gemstones.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to add on that. In the cooperative that I work with in Zambia, one of the members is a quality management trainer, and he's actually interested in setting up a gemstone lab in Zambia. So we have an issue, we don't have any defined gemstone standards in Zambia. So he's able to bring that experience to the industry, and he's currently helping the cooperative set up a quality management system. And in the same token, there is a female gem cutter who has recently taken a course in health and safety. So as Eric mentioned, you know, there has been some issues in the industry with silicosis, you know. So as they set up their own, as the cooperative is setting up its own gem cutting workshop, she is functioning as a health and safety expert, and guiding the cooperative in how to design the workshop. So it's yeah, there are many transferable skills. Everyone has got some transferable skills that they can bring to the table, and it's just a matter of being aware on how they can be utilized.
Thank you. I guess the answer is taking initiative and bring it onto table is important. Okay, great. The next question is from Ana Carolina Sanchez, and she's asking, I would like to know what your thoughts are regarding the Brazilian practices in responsible extraction. I believe that means more mining. How is it perceived by the international market? Any particular experience with Brazilian gemstone mining area?
Yes. Matter of fact, I have another conference call on that in a few minutes. I think in a lot of ways, people look at this movement as an African-centric sort of thing, whereas it is much broader than that. This is a somewhat newer concept in Brazil. Not that they, you know, haven't known where they're mining for a long time and that sort of thing, but we're working with 2 or 3 areas and regions now where their gems have always been taken out of Brazil, sold generically, mixed with other origins, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it doesn't do anything for the community. So we're working with some now where it is to promote their community, their environment, the people there, as well as the gemstones under the brand that they would like to see it under. So that it is starting in Brazil now. They are seeing this in other areas, so they are quite curious. And I think it's just to tie up with companies or laboratories or associations that at least have, you know, this on their radar. And but I think it will grow in Brazil. Yes.
Great, thank you. And the last question, because we literally have a few minutes left, this might be a good one to sum it up, because we touched on different parts of this question, but maybe we can sum it all up with this question. It's coming from Sarah Sanzer, and she's asking how to recognize sustainable gemstones during gem show like Tucson. Time is money for buyers at this time of the year. How can we get more involved during buying? How can we make the difference between greenwashing and real sustainable suppliers? Go on.
Ask questions, no?
Absolutely. There are ethical metalsmiths actually developed about a 10-question little thing that you could ask people. And the first 2 were, you know, to determine, do you want to even talk about number 3, 4, 5? But have down what you believe in and what you're hoping for. And just like Laurent said, ask questions. That's where we start on all suppliers now. We really don't care what they're selling. We want to know what their positions are before we bring them on as a supplier. So ask questions. You'll be able to move through the trade show very quickly that way. So,
any other opinions on that?
I think maybe the other approach is some people are very allergic to these terms. Some dealers are also very allergic to it. So maybe the question when you walk around a trade show, there's people who've been working ethically without ever using that term for many decades. They've always worked with the same miners. They know the communities. So it's maybe to not always just, you know, what are your sustainability principles? Please list them. Give me a 20-page PDF, but have them show you photos, have them tell you stories of where the material comes from. And maybe with some people, you need to approach it a little bit differently. And I think like that, we're also going to convince more people in the trade that maybe we have kind of the same ideas, but we don't necessarily use the same language. But it comes back down to asking questions, but engage, exchange. And I think a lot of people who sell gems are enthusiastic about the product. There are people who are in it purely for the money, as in any other industry. But a lot of people are quite happy to tell stories, and not just greenwashing stories, but genuine stories of where their materials come from. So, you know, ask them questions.
Thank you. This is actually a follow-up, but basic, and it's quite relevant. How sustainable and ethical are lab-made gemstones as an alternative?
oh, that's one of my questions. So many people look at laboratory stones and they say, you know, we didn't have to dig a hole in the earth, we didn't have to do all these things. And to be real honest, I don't know. I've seen some studies on what kind of energy footprint lab grown has compared to mined stones, but I think all that is somewhat missing the point. There's 20, I think the number is 20 million people involved in artisanal mining worldwide. And if everybody says we're going to go to laboratory stones to solve blood diamond or whatever the issue might be, you're going to unemploy 20 million people. And I think the environmental and social impact of that is far worse than the hole that one might dig to get that gemstone. So I look at it as a social impact just as much as a environmental impact.
Thank you. We discussed this, well, not this particular subject in general, but about diamonds in one of our conferences last year. And people need to understand that the raw material for producing synthetic gemstones are coming from nature through mining as well. So it's not just about the energy or you know, miners and so on, but also where the raw material or the nutrients to grow those synthetic stones come from, and they are natural too. So same mining issues and ethics and sustainability apply to them. People need to be aware of this. That's how I look at it, at least from science point of view. Okay, well, I know that we could talk for another 2 hours. This is a fascinating subject, and we have learned so much from all of you. Thank you so very much. And I'd like to end this, but we shared your contact information, and we really, really appreciate your time, your generosity, and your knowledge that you shared with us. We would like to see you all at our next event, which will be in Tucson in 31st of January 2024, which will also be the kickoff our 50th anniversary. Just to give you a little sense on that, it's going to be great, and hopefully we'll see you all there and share more information, more gemology, and especially more passion about gemology. Thank you so very much, and I leave it with Terry. And thanks for joining us today as well.
Thank you, Patricia, Laurent, and Eric, for enlightening us on this really important subject. I learned a lot, and I really appreciate it. I know our audience did too. Thank you, Cheatham, for recognizing the need for these gemological career forums. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'd like to invite any of you on this call to join the hundreds of successful gemologists from around the world who are valued members of AGA. We offer memberships at several different levels, starting with a student membership, which is free for the first year while you're working on your gemological studies. If you love gemology, but you don't have a gemological credential, we have associate membership available. And for those with gemological credentials, we offer the AGA voting membership. For more information about becoming an AGA member, please visit our website. That's www.accreditedgemologists.org, and that's gemologist with one M. No doubt many of you are here today through the wonders of social media. So please, if you saw something there, like, follow, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Kate posts our events, interesting gemological news, and opportunities throughout the field regularly. And like Cheatham said, I look forward to seeing as many of you as can make it in Tucson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, hope you all have a nice day or evening for some of you there.